which leads us to the next facet, which is the realization and the answer to the question of what is death? Or, in other words, the realization of immortality. Because time is just a projection of your own mind, it's just imaginary, because there is no past and no future other than in one's imagination, because everything is eternal, the now is eternal, now is what you are, now is I amness. You realize that what death is death is purely imaginary. There is no such thing as death. Death is impossible. You are totally immortal and eternal. As God, as nothingness, as infinity. You exist as all things at all times. It doesn't matter what form you exist in, because you are all forms. You incarnate as all beings. You are looking through the eyes of all beings. So, yes, you can kill this Leo body sitting here, but it won't matter. I'll just respawn as something else. You realize that God cannot die because God has nowhere to go. If you were to kill God or destroy God, where would God go? God is already nowhere and nothing. God is already at the place where God would be if you killed him, so to speak. And then you realize, what is death? Death is just a story that I've been telling myself. Death is a story the ego creates. It's always something you imagine. There is no death in the now, and the now is the only thing there is. Death is, as humans conceive of it, is always some future idea, literally purely imaginary. And you realize this on a visceral level, to the point where you are fully immortal. And at this point, usually comes the next facet of realization here, which is the realization of paradise or heaven or perfection. You realize that reality is absolute perfection. With the realization of immortality, you have no more fear, because nothing bad can happen to you. You've literally transcended death. And so as an immortal, eternal being that you now realize that you are, you're in paradise. You're in heaven. You realize that heaven is right here, right now. Heaven is not some place you go to. Heaven is just the realization of eternity, of absolute love. Heaven and hell, you realize, are not physical locations. The only difference between heaven and hell is how much you're attached to your ego. The more you're attached to ego, the more you're in hell. And when your ego is completely surrendered and you realize that you're no self, that you're immortal, you're in heaven. And that doesn't depend on changing your physical location. It only depends upon your state of consciousness. How conscious are you of your own immortality? If you become conscious that you're immortal right now, you will automatically be in heaven. Which brings us to the next facet, which usually comes and accompanies this realization I was just talking about, which is the realization of bliss or ecstasy. People use this word ecstasy and bliss a lot. But again, this word rings hollow for most people, for 99.999%, because they don't have a reference experience for what ecstasy really is. Ecstasy is not just extreme pleasure. Ecstasy is the realization of immortality and the realization that everything is heaven. When you realize that, it's so good, it's infinitely good. It's not just good, it's good to the infinite degree. It's so much goodness that you can't contain it. Your body can't hold it. Your entire body shakes and shudders in a cosmic orgasm of bliss. It's perfection. It's total peace. It's absolute love. That's truly ecstasy. And very few humans have a reference experience for that word, ecstasy. But you can reach that, and then you'll know what the word ecstasy actually means. You'll know what I'm talking about. Some of you actually know what I'm talking about. Many of you don't. That's something to work on.